There's something truly terrifying about the idea that you might not be as alone as you think. When the comfort of your own home becomes a hunting ground, when a stranger's eyes follow you from the shadows, when the walls around you start hiding dark secrets, you'll wish you had trusted your instincts. Tonight, we dive into 3 horrifying true stories that will make you question the safety of your own space. Keep watching, because you never know who's watching you. Story 1. The Obsession. I was never the type to believe in red flags. I thought I was a pretty good judge of character, or at least careful enough not to let anyone shady into my life. Turns out, I was wrong. It started about a year ago. I was 23, single, and figured I'd try out dating apps. Everyone was doing it, so why not? That's how I met Eric. He seemed normal, attractive, polite, funny in a low-key kind of way. We matched, chatted for a couple of days, and decided to meet up for coffee. Our first date was quick, less than an hour. Just a way to screen him, you know? Make sure he wasn't some psycho. He passed the test, seemed normal enough. We met up a few more times over the next month. Dinner, drinks, a couple of movie nights at his place. Nothing serious, but I could tell he was more into it than I was. That's when the little things started to bother me. He would text constantly. I mean, if I didn't reply within 10 minutes, he'd follow up with a question mark, sometimes 2. He'd ask where I was, who I was with, even what I was doing. At first, I brushed it off as him being clingy, but it started to feel off. The turning point came after our 4th date. We'd had a couple of drinks at a bar near my place. He was buzzed, maybe more than buzzed. He got handsy, trying to pull me into his lap and kiss me in front of everyone. I'm not big on public affection, so I pulled away, told him I was tired, and that we should call it a night. He walked me to my car and asked if he could come over. I told him no, that I had to work early. He laughed, said he'd drag me to work in the morning. That rubbed me the wrong way. I smiled politely, got in my car, and started driving home. That's when I noticed his car behind me. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe we just happened to take the same route home. But after the 3rd turn, I knew. He was following me. I pulled over and texted him. "Are you following me?" He replied almost immediately. "Just making sure you get home safe." I called him. He didn't pick up. He just kept following me. I pulled over again and texted him to stop. A few seconds later, his car slowed, hesitated, and then drove off. I thought that was it. I was wrong. The next morning, he texted, "Sorry if I freaked you out last night. Want to do dinner tonight?" I didn't respond. A couple of hours later, he sent, "Did I do something wrong?" By the time I woke up the next day, there were 6 unread texts from him. When I finally replied, I kept it polite but firm. "Hey, you're a nice guy, but I don't think this is working out. I hope you understand." That's when the angry texts started. He accused me of wasting his time, called me selfish, said I should pay him back for all the dates. Then came the no-caller ID calls, back to back. I blocked him. I thought that was the end of it. 2 days later, I came home to find a bouquet of flowers on my doorstep. No note, but I knew it was him. I texted him one last time. "Do not contact me again or I'll get a restraining order." He never replied. The calls stopped. The texts stopped. I started to feel like maybe it was over. But then, one night, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door opening. I live alone. My heart slammed into my chest. I lay frozen under the covers, listening. I heard the soft shuffle of feet on the carpet. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering into the receiver. A dark figure moved toward my dresser. I could barely see in the dim light, but I could make out the outline of a man. He started opening the drawers. I heard him mutter under his breath, low and angry. And then he sat down on the edge of my bed. I could see his legs beneath the bed skirt. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. I pressed my hands over my mouth to keep from making a sound. He sat there for what felt like forever. Then he stood up and whispered, "You think you can just ignore me?" My blood turned to ice. The sound of a knock on the door made him freeze. He cursed under his breath and walked out. I heard the front door creak open and then slam shut. The police arrived a few minutes later. They searched the house and found that one of the windows had been forced open. The lock had been broken. I gave them Eric's name. They couldn't find him. He'd vanished. For weeks, I jumped at every noise. I couldn't sleep unless all the doors and windows were locked, and even then I'd wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone was watching me. A month later, I was walking through a mall when I saw him. Eric. He was standing outside a store, staring at me. He smiled. I turned and walked away as fast as I could. I never saw him again after that, but sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment, I swear I hear footsteps outside my door. If you ever get a bad feeling about someone, trust it. You never know who's watching. Story 2. The wrong number. I almost didn't pick up the call. It was late, past midnight, and the number was unknown. But I was half asleep, groggy, and without thinking, I swiped to answer. "Hello?" There was silence for a moment. Then a low male voice said, "Hey, who is this?" "It's me." I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes. "Sorry, I think you have the wrong number." The voice chuckled softly. "No, I don't." That woke me up completely. "Okay, well, who are you? You'll figure it out soon." I hung up. Creepy, sure, but probably just a prank. I put my phone on silent and tried to go back to sleep. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The next morning, I had a text from the same unknown number. "Morning. Did you sleep well?" I stared at the screen, unsettled. I didn't reply. Over the next few days, the texts kept coming. Little things like, "What are you doing? Busy today? Saw you at the store earlier. Cute sweater." That one stopped me cold, because I had been at the store that day and I had been wearing a sweater. I glanced around my apartment, feeling watched. I replied, "Who is this?" No answer. That night I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when I got another text. "I like the way you decorated your living room." My heart started racing. I jumped up, ran to the window, and yanked the blinds shut. My hands were shaking. I checked the door, locked. Then I texted back, "Who are you?" 3 dots appeared, typing. Then they disappeared. A minute later, another text, "Check your front door." My breath hitched. I walked to the door, hesitated, and peered through the peephole. Nothing. Slowly, I unlocked it and opened it just a crack. On the ground was a single black rose. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I blocked the number, changed my locks the next day. For a while, things were quiet, until about 2 weeks later. I had just gotten home from work, tossed my bag on the floor, and collapsed on the couch. My phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. "Miss me?" My stomach dropped. I ignored it. Another text. "You look tired." I jumped up and ran to the window. There was a man standing on the sidewalk across the street. Just standing there, looking directly at my window. I couldn't make out his face in the dark, but I could feel his eyes on me. My phone buzzed again. A picture this time. A blurry shot of my apartment window, from the street. I called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. They told me there wasn't much they could do unless I had a name or actual proof of a threat. I showed them the texts, but they just said to stay alert and call again if anything happened. That night, I barely slept. The next day, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a small velvet box. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a ring, cheap, silver and too small for my finger. A note beneath it read, "Soon." I called the police again. They took the box, the note, and told me they'd investigate. That was the last I heard from them. 2 nights later, I woke up to a noise, a soft tapping. I sat up, heart racing. It was coming from the window. Slowly, I crept toward it and peeked out from behind the curtain. He was there, standing just outside my window. His face was shadowed, but I could see his eyes. He smiled and pressed his hand against the glass. I screamed and ran for my phone. As I dialed 911, I heard the soft creak of a door opening, my bedroom door. I froze, slowly turned my head. A dark figure was standing just inside my room. I dropped the phone and bolted toward the front door. I could hear his footsteps behind me as I ripped the door open and ran outside, screaming for help. My neighbor came out, and the guy took off. The police came quickly this time. They found the window lock had been forced open. There were muddy footprints leading from the window to my bedroom door. They never caught him. But the texts stopped. The calls stopped. I moved 2 weeks later, changed my number, and tried to forget it ever happened. Sometimes, though, I'll be sitting in my new apartment and I'll get that feeling that someone's watching me. And once, a few months ago, I found a single black rose on my doorstep. No note, but I know exactly who it was. If you ever get a call from an unknown number, don't answer. You never know who might be watching. Story 3. The Silent Neighbor. I never thought much about my neighbor. I had moved into my apartment a year ago. It was a small place, a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a quiet building. The kind of place where people mostly keep to themselves. That's part of why I picked it. I work from home, so I don't get out much. My days are pretty routine. Work, dinner, maybe some Netflix and bed. I liked it that way. Quiet. Predictable. Then, about 6 months ago, I started noticing him. The guy from 13B. I'd seen him in passing a few times. A tall, thin man with dark hair and pale skin. He never said much. Just nodded or gave a small smile when we passed in the hall. I figured he was shy. Maybe a little socially awkward. But then I started seeing him more often. I'd be getting my mail. He'd be there. I'd be taking out the trash. He'd come down the stairs at the same time. Once I was coming back from the grocery store and he was just standing in the lobby, not doing anything, just standing there. And then he started looking at me. I'd catch him watching me when I left for a walk or when I unlocked my door. His gaze would linger just a little too long, his expression blank, almost curious. It was unsettling, but I brushed it off. Just a socially awkward neighbor. No big deal. Until the night I found him standing outside my door. It was around midnight. I had just turned off the TV and was heading to bed when I heard it. A soft knock. Not loud, just deliberate. I froze. Who would be knocking that late? I walked to the door and checked the peephole. It was him, standing there with his hands at his sides, head tilted slightly to the left. He wasn't smiling, just staring at the door. I hesitated before opening it and asked, can I help you? He smiled faintly and said, "Hey, just wanted to check in on you." I asked, "Check in on me?" He replied, "Yeah, you didn't leave your apartment today." My stomach dropped and asked, How would you know that?" He blinked slowly and said, "I notice things." I forced a smile and said, "That's nice, but I'm fine, thanks." I closed the door and locked it. From the other side, I heard him say softly, "Good night." I didn't sleep much that night. After that, things escalated. I'd come home to find small things moved in my apartment. My remote would be on the floor instead of the couch. The bathroom light would be on when I knew I had turned it off. Then I started hearing noises at night, soft scraping sounds, a faint creaking near the walls. One night I woke up to the sound of something moving in my kitchen. My heart pounded as I crept out of bed and peeked around the corner. Nothing. But the refrigerator door was slightly open. I started wondering if I was losing my mind. Then, one evening, I was getting out of the shower when I noticed something strange. The bathroom vent had been shifted slightly. The screws were loose. That's when it hit me. I checked every vent in the apartment. Most were screwed in tight, but the one in my bedroom, the screws were loose. There were tiny scratch marks on the edges like someone had removed it and put it back. My heart was pounding as I grabbed a flashlight and shone it inside the vent. I saw something metallic. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a key. My key. I stumbled back, my breath coming fast. Someone had been inside. Someone had taken my key and left it there, and I knew exactly who it was. I called the landlord and demanded they change the locks immediately. I didn't mention my neighbor. I still didn't have proof, but I knew it was him. Things were quiet for a while after that. He stopped looking at me in the hall, stopped showing up when I got the mail. I thought maybe it was over. But about 2 weeks later, I woke up to a sound, my phone buzzing. It was a text from an unknown number. "You locked the door." My heart slammed into my chest. I texted back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared, typing, then nothing. A minute later, another text. "You looked so peaceful sleeping." I jumped out of bed, heart racing. My first thought was that he had somehow gotten into my apartment. I checked the door, still locked. Checked the windows, still shut. Another text came through. "Smile." A picture popped up. It was me, asleep in my bed. I called 911. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line. I grabbed a kitchen knife and pressed my back against the wall, heart hammering. The police arrived within 5 minutes. They searched the apartment. Nothing. They checked the hallways, empty. Then one of the officers called out, "Hey, we found something." They led me to the bedroom vent. The cover was loose again. They removed it. Inside was a small camera. My neighbor was arrested that night. They found a hidden crawl space behind the building's walls, small enough for someone to move through. He had been using it to enter my apartment, watching me. It turns out he had a history of stalking. The police told me he had been evicted from another building years earlier for similar behavior. I moved out 2 days later. Left most of my stuff behind. I didn't want anything from that place. I'm in a new apartment now across the city. I changed my phone number, changed my job. I thought I was safe. But last week, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a single line written in shaky handwriting. "I miss seeing you smile. If you ever feel like someone's watching you, trust your gut. Stay safe. If you've made it this far, you're brave. But remember, sometimes the scariest threats aren't the ghosts or monsters in the dark. They're the people who walk among us, unnoticed." If you enjoyed these chilling stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because you never know when the next story might hit a little too close to home. Stay safe out there.